Hello everybody again, and greetings from my home in Berkeley, California. I'm really happy to be in touch with you all during these very difficult times and to know that you are well. As you all know, the coronavirus has resulted in massive disruptions of our daily lives, and its impacts are likely to lead to historic political and social transformations. So today I would like to share with you a systemic analysis of the COVID-19 crisis. In an essay I recently wrote with Hazel Henderson, and which is available on my website, we provide such a systemic analysis in the form of a positive futuristic scenario, looking back at 2020 in a fictitious way from 2050. Today in the webinar, I would like to just summarize the basic ideas that underlie this scenario. In my view, the coronavirus must be seen as a biological response of Gaia, our living planet, to the ecological and social emergency that humanity has brought upon itself. It arose from an ecological imbalance, and its impact and dramatic consequences are so dramatic because of social and economic imbalances. During the last decades of the 20th century, humanity has exceeded the Earth's carrying capacity, that is, the number of people the biosphere can support without environmental degradation. World population has grown to 7.8 billion people, and the irrational obsession of our political and corporate leaders with undifferentiated, unlimited economic and corporate growth has generated a multifaceted existential crisis that is now threatening the very survival of civilization. Scientists and environmental activists have warned about the dire consequences of our unsustainable economic, social, and political system for decades. But until now, our corporate and political leaders, unable to break their intoxication with financial profits and political power, have stubbornly resisted these warnings. Now, however, our political and financial elites are forced to pay attention because COVID-19 has brought the earlier warnings to real time. The clear-cutting of large areas of tropical rainforest by multinational food corporations, relentlessly pursuing excessive growth and profits, as well as massive intrusions into other ecosystems around the world, driven by the same motivation, have fragmented these self-regulating systems and have fractured the web of life. One of the many consequences of these destructive actions was that viruses, which had lived in symbiosis with certain animal species where they caused no harm, have now jumped from those animals to humans where they are highly toxic and often lethal. In the 1960s, an obscure virus jumped from a rare species of monkeys in West Africa to humans. From there, it spread to the United States, where it was identified as the HIV virus and caused the AIDS epidemic, killing an estimated 39 million people worldwide over 4 decades. Similarly, the coronavirus jumped from a species of bats in China to humans, from where it rapidly spread around the world. Now, population density is the key variable in the spread of COVID-19. And population density is often a consequence of excessive profit maximizing, whether we are talking about giant cruise ships or other forms of mass tourism, overcrowded gatherings in huge arenas for sports or other forms of entertainment, giant supermarkets and department stores, or crowded living situations caused by social and economic inequality. Ecology has taught us that maximizing any single variable will invariably lead to stress and vulnerability of the system as a whole. Now, in the past, these vulnerable social and cultural conditions were usually concealed by the corporate media. But now the coronavirus, which does not know any social or cultural boundaries, has laid them open. The role of social justice during a pandemic is particularly interesting. You see, in normal times, the rich are relatively isolated from the poor. They live in their own neighborhoods, have their own schools, hospitals, restaurants, clubs, and so on. So the fate of the poor does not affect them greatly. During a pandemic like COVID-19, the situation changes dramatically. Since the virus does not know any social boundaries, the fate of the poor can no longer be separated from that of the rich. And because of crowded living situations, lack of access to clean water, and especially in the United States, inadequate healthcare and social protection, the poor are much more susceptible to being infected. And sooner or later, they will pass on the infection also to the rich, even though the two classes are separated socially, because they're not separated biologically. You see, there are numerous physical contacts between the rich and their personal assistants, drivers, delivery services, cleaning and maintenance staff, and so on. And through these physical contacts, the virus propagates and infects people regardless of their social class. So during a pandemic, social justice is no longer a political issue of left versus right, but becomes an issue of life and death. To prevent the spread of pandemics now and in the future, it will be essential to improve the living conditions of the poor. More generally, ethical behavior, that is, behavior for the common good, becomes an issue of life and death during a pandemic. Because a pandemic like COVID-19 can only be overcome by collective, cooperative actions. Now, similar considerations apply to world population growth. Demographers have known for a long time that the most effective ways of curbing population growth are educating girls and enhancing the role and status of women around the world, ensuring their access to economic and political power, and safeguarding their reproductive rights. Once again, we see that social justice goes hand in hand with ecological balance. When the pandemic spread around the world in February and March of this year, one country after the other went into lockdown, with only essential businesses remaining open and most people confined to their homes, as we still are today. As a consequence, the transportation of people and goods was radically reduced. Supply chains were disrupted, businesses closed, the stock market collapsed, and unemployment soared. The worldwide health crisis has gone hand in hand with the worldwide economic crisis. Both of these crises have led to widespread tragic consequences for individuals and communities around the world. However, from a planetary ecological perspective, there have also been many positive consequences. As automobile traffic and industrial activities decreased dramatically, the pollution of major cities suddenly disappeared, and we now enjoy again clean air and clear skies. On the beaches of Brazil, critically endangered sea turtles are now hatching in a stress-free environment, undisturbed by tourists. As giant cruise ships no longer enter the Venetian lagoon and other tourists stay at home, the canals in Venice have become so clear that fish can be seen again. In India, residents of Punjab are now able to enjoy a stunning view of a chain of the Himalayas 200 kilometers away, which they had not seen in 30 years. The coronavirus has already been more effective in curbing CO2 emissions and slowing down climate breakdown than all of the world's policy initiatives combined. Now, this does not mean that we want to go on in the present situation. But the world's COVID-19 response has shown us what is possible when people realize that their lives are at stake, individually during the pandemic, and it applies also to the threat to civilization as a whole in the climate emergency. We know now that the world is able to respond with urgency and coherence once the political will has been aroused. With COVID-19, Gaia has presented us with valuable life-saving lessons. The question is, will humanity heed those lessons? Will we shift from undifferentiated extractive economic growth to regenerative qualitative growth? Will we replace fossil fuels with renewable forms of energy for all our energy needs? Will we stop excessive mass tourism and instead revitalize local communities? Will we replace our centralized energy-intensive system of industrial agriculture with organic, community-oriented, regenerative farming? Will we plant billions of trees to draw down CO2 from the atmosphere and restore the world's ecosystems so that viruses dangerous to humans are confined again to other species where they don't do harm? We have the knowledge and the technologies to embark on all these initiatives. Will we have the political will? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind, to quote Bob Dylan. However, what we are seeing already is that corresponding social policies that were unthinkable even a couple of months ago are now being discussed seriously in various countries. For example, Denmark plans to pay 75% of the salaries lost by employees in private companies to help them through the crisis. The UK similarly plans to cover 80% of salaries. In the United States, the idea of a universal basic income, long considered to be a fringe idea, is now being discussed even by Republican politicians. Spain is nationalizing its private hospitals. California is leasing hotel rooms to shelter the homeless. The Green New Deal, already endorsed previously by some Democratic presidential candidates in the United States, is now being discussed in the mainstream as a program of economic recovery. If we can catalyze global leadership to continue such social policies, and if we can add to them policies that respect and cooperate with nature's inherent ability to sustain life, in other words, with sustainable policies, we may not only overcome the COVID-19 pandemic, but also succeed in stabilizing world population and the climate, nurturing local communities, and restoring the Earth's ecosystem. We may see CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere return to the safe level of 350 parts per million, and we may see climate catastrophes become rare as they have been in previous centuries. Looking back on 2020, future historians may conclude that even though COVID-19 had widespread tragic consequences for individuals and communities around the world, in the long run, it may have saved humanity and large parts of the planetary community of life from extinction.